In 2026, the greatest competition you will face is not outside you. It is not technology, not artificial intelligence, not economic pressure, and not other people. The real competition is the unconscious patterns running your life while you believe you are making conscious choices. Most people will spend this year reacting, scrolling, comparing, consuming, and numbing themselves. A few will turn inward, and those few will move far ahead without making noise. To stay ahead of everyone, you must understand a simple truth. The world does not defeat people. Unexamined minds do. What you do not understand within yourself will eventually control you from the outside. Every fear you avoid, every emotion you suppress, every truth you refuse to face quietly shapes your decisions, relationships, and future. Mastery begins when you stop trying to control life and start understanding your inner life. The mind is not one voice, it is a crowded room. There is the part of you that wants comfort, the part that wants approval, the part that fears rejection, the part that seeks meaning, and the part that hides wounds behind ambition. Most people identify with only one voice and call it me. That is why they are easily manipulated, emotionally reactive, and exhausted. The person who listens to all these voices without becoming possessed by them gains clarity others never reach. In 2026, distraction will be everywhere. Endless information, opinions, trends, and outrage will fight for your attention. The person who cannot sit alone with their thoughts will be controlled by those who can. Silence will become a rare skill. Stillness will become power. When you learn to observe your thoughts instead of obeying them, you create distance. In that distance, choice is born. Many people believe success comes from motivation. It does not. Motivation is unstable. It rises and falls with emotion. True advantage comes from integration. The parts of you that feel lazy, angry, insecure, jealous, or afraid are not enemies. They are signals. When ignored, they sabotage you. When understood, they become sources of strength. The mind becomes dangerous only when it is divided against itself. You will not stay ahead by pretending to be positive all the time. That is denial disguised as optimism. You will stay ahead by confronting your shadow, the traits you dislike, hide, or judge in yourself and others. What irritates you in people is often something unacknowledged within you. What you envy points to unrealized potential. When you reclaim these parts, your energy returns. Your confidence becomes grounded, not performative. Most people in 2026 will be chasing external validation, likes, praise, titles, and attention. They will shape their personalities to be acceptable rather than authentic. This creates inner emptiness no achievement can fill. The individual who builds an inner authority, a sense of self not dependent on applause, becomes unshakable. When you know who you are, you do not need to announce it. Your mind also remembers everything you refuse to process. Unresolved emotions do not disappear, they repeat. Patterns in relationships, self-sabotage, chronic anxiety, sudden anger, these are unfinished psychological business. Staying ahead means breaking cycles, not repeating them with new faces and new goals. Reflection is not weakness. It is strategic intelligence. Dreams, impulses, and intuition are not random. They are communications from deeper layers of the psyche. In a world obsessed with logic and speed, the person who listens inwardly gains insight others miss. This does not mean abandoning reason. It means balancing it with inner awareness. When logic and intuition work together, decisions become precise and timely. Mastering your mind does not mean controlling every thought. It means recognizing which thoughts are yours and which are inherited fears, cultural conditioning, or unresolved trauma. Freedom begins when you stop identifying with every mental impulse. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes them. In 2026, many will feel lost, overwhelmed, and anxious without understanding why. The person who has explored their inner landscape will move calmly through chaos. While others panic, you will see patterns. While others react, you will respond. While others chase shortcuts, you will build depth. Staying ahead is not about dominance over others. It is about coherence within yourself. When your inner world is aligned, your outer actions become effortless. People sense this. Opportunities move toward clarity. Leadership emerges naturally without force. The future does not belong to the loudest voice or the fastest mover. It belongs to the individual who knows themselves deeply enough to remain centered in uncertainty. Master your mind, and you will not need to outrun anyone. You will already be ahead. Self-mastery begins where unconscious patterns are made conscious. Most people believe they are in control of their lives, yet they live on automatic mode, driven by habits, emotional reactions, inherited beliefs, and unexamined fears. They call these reactions personality, destiny, or luck, without realizing that what operates unconsciously always seeks expression. Whatever remains unseen within does not disappear. It directs behavior silently. To master the self, one must first recognize how little of the self is actually known. From early childhood, the mind learns how to survive. It observes what is rewarded and what is punished, what is loved and what is rejected. Slowly, parts of the personality are encouraged while others are hidden away. The mind adapts not for truth, but for acceptance and safety. Over time, this adaptation becomes invisible. A person grows into adulthood believing these patterns are who they truly are, unaware that much of their inner life has been buried beneath roles, masks, and expectations. These unconscious patterns shape everything. They influence the partners a person chooses, the opportunities they avoid, the risks they take, and the limits they place on themselves. A repeated failure is rarely random. A repeated attraction is rarely coincidence. These are echoes of unresolved inner dynamics seeking resolution. Without awareness, the same lessons repeat in different forms, creating the illusion that life is unfair or people are unreliable. The unconscious mind communicates through emotion before logic. Sudden anger, unexplained anxiety, irrational fear, or intense attachment often signal something deeper than the present moment. When ignored, these emotions hijack decision-making. When observed, they become messages. Mastery does not mean suppressing emotion. It means listening without being controlled by it. Awareness creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space, freedom emerges. Many people fear looking inward because they believe they will find weakness, darkness, or pain. In reality, what they find is power that has been locked away. The unconscious does not only hold wounds, it holds creativity, intuition, resilience, and instinct. When these forces are denied, they turn inward and manifest as self-doubt or sabotage. When they are acknowledged, they become allies. A mind that has never been questioned cannot be trusted. Beliefs formed in childhood often operate in adulthood without review. A person may believe they are not good enough, not capable, or not deserving, without ever remembering when or why that belief was formed. These assumptions feel like facts because they have lived in the mind for so long. Conscious awareness challenges these inner narratives not through force but through observation. To make the unconscious conscious requires honesty without judgment. It requires the courage to notice patterns without defending them. When someone becomes aware of how they seek validation, avoid conflict, chase approval, or fear rejection, the spell begins to weaken. Awareness alone starts dissolving compulsive behavior. The mind cannot run a pattern indefinitely once it is fully seen. Projection is one of the clearest signs of unconscious material. People often criticize, admire, or resent others with unusual intensity. These reactions rarely belong to the other person alone. They are mirrors reflecting denied aspects of the self. What is hated often represents what was forbidden. What is admired often represents what was never claimed. Understanding this shifts attention inward, where real change begins. Time spent alone with one's thoughts becomes essential. In silence, unconscious material rises. This is why many avoid stillness. Noise, entertainment, and constant activity keep deeper awareness at bay. Yet without silence, the mind remains fragmented. Stillness is not emptiness, it is confrontation. It brings clarity, discomfort, and eventually integration. Dreams, spontaneous thoughts, and intuitive impulses are expressions of the unconscious attempting communication. Ignoring them does not silence them, it only forces them to speak louder through symptoms and repetition. When attention is given, patterns become visible, symbols repeat, themes emerge, meaning reveals itself gradually, not logically, but experientially. Self-mastery is not about perfection or control. It is about relationship with the inner world. When a person recognizes fear without identifying with it, ambition without being possessed by it, and desire without being enslaved by it, balance forms. The psyche moves toward wholeness naturally when allowed to express all its parts consciously. Most people seek control over their circumstances while remaining unaware of the forces controlling their reactions. They attempt to change habits without understanding the emotional need behind them. They seek discipline without understanding resistance. This creates inner conflict, where one part pushes forward while another pulls back. Awareness reconciles these opposites. When unconscious material becomes conscious, energy previously spent on suppression becomes available for growth. Clarity replaces confusion. Choice replaces compulsion. A person no longer feels mysteriously blocked or driven. They begin acting from understanding rather than impulse. Their decisions become slower but more accurate, less dramatic but more effective. The mind naturally resists this process because the unconscious prefers familiarity over truth. Even painful patterns feel safer than the unknown. Awareness disrupts this comfort. It challenges identity. It asks uncomfortable questions. Yet this disruption is necessary. Growth always begins with destabilization. As awareness deepens, the individual begins to recognize internal contradictions without needing to resolve them immediately. Strength and vulnerability coexist. Confidence and doubt share the same space. This acceptance reduces inner tension. The need to prove, defend, or overcompensate fades. Behavior becomes simpler, grounded, and intentional. In a world that rewards speed and surface-level thinking, the person who understands their inner patterns gains a silent advantage. They are less reactive, less predictable, and less easily manipulated. They recognize when emotions are being triggered intentionally. They see through trends, pressure, and collective fear because they are familiar with their own. Self-mastery is not achieved by conquering the mind, but by illuminating it. What is seen clearly loses its power to control. What is integrated stops demanding attention through disruption. The individual who brings light to their unconscious does not become flawless, they become whole. And wholeness moves with a quiet confidence that does not need to rush, prove, or dominate, because it understands itself deeply enough to remain steady while others are driven by forces they have never met. Distraction weakens the mind. Inner silence sharpens it. The modern mind is rarely alone with itself. Noise has become constant, not only in the external world but within the inner landscape as well. Thoughts collide, notifications interrupt, opinions flood in, and attention is pulled in countless directions. Most people mistake this mental activity for productivity or awareness, yet it fragments perception and dulls insight. A mind that is never still becomes reactive, not intelligent. Silence is not the absence of thought. It is the ability to observe thought without being dragged by it. When the mind is constantly stimulated, it loses its natural capacity to reflect. Reflection requires space. Without space, meaning collapses into urgency, and urgency becomes the default state. This is why so many feel exhausted without understanding why. Their energy is not spent on creation, but on constant mental switching. Distraction operates subtly. It disguises itself as information, connection, entertainment, and even self-improvement. The mind convinces itself that staying busy is necessary, that stillness is laziness or avoidance. In truth, constant stimulation often serves as an escape from inner discomfort. Silence brings unresolved emotions to the surface, and many prefer noise over confrontation with their inner state. The mind sharpens not by consuming more, but by discerning better. Inner silence creates the conditions for discernment. When external input decreases, internal signals become clearer. Patterns once hidden by noise reveal themselves. Thoughts slow down. Emotional undercurrents become noticeable. The individual begins to recognize what is truly theirs and what has been absorbed from the environment. A distracted mind is easily influenced. It reacts quickly but understands slowly. It adopts opinions without examination and desires without reflection. Trends, outrage, and collective fear spread fastest among those who do not pause. Silence interrupts this automatic absorption. It introduces a moment of choice where awareness can intervene. In that pause, independence is born. Inner silence does not mean withdrawal from the world. It means engagement without entanglement. A person grounded in silence can participate fully while remaining internally steady. They hear words without immediately responding. They observe situations without rushing to judgment. This restraint is not passivity, it is precision. Every response becomes deliberate rather than impulsive. The mind has its own rhythm when undisturbed. Ideas surface organically. Intuition emerges without force. Creativity flows when it is not pressured by constant input. Many seek inspiration by looking outward, yet the most original insights arise from inward listening. Silence allows the unconscious to communicate in its own language through images, sensations, and sudden clarity. Distraction weakens memory and depth. When attention is divided, experiences are only half registered. Life becomes shallow, not because events lack meaning, but because they are never fully experienced. Silence restores depth by allowing attention to settle. What is fully attended to transforms the individual. What is skimmed leaves no imprint. The fear of silence often reveals dependency on distraction for emotional regulation. When noise stops, anxiety may rise. This is not a failure of silence, but evidence of what has been avoided. Stillness acts like a mirror, reflecting the inner state without distortion. Over time, this reflection becomes less threatening and more instructive. Emotional resilience grows through repeated exposure to quiet awareness. In silence, the mind becomes less defensive, without the need to perform, compare, or respond. Self-judgment softens. The inner dialogue changes from criticism to curiosity. This shift allows for honest self-observation without collapse or denial. The mind learns to hold complexity without rushing to resolution. Many believe power comes from expression alone, yet restraint is equally powerful. The person who can remain silent when provoked, who can listen without preparing a response, who can wait without anxiety, possesses a rare form of control. This control is not imposed, it is cultivated. Silence trains patience, and patience sharpens perception. Inner silence also reveals misalignment. When external noise fades, internal contradictions become audible. Desires that conflict with values, goals that no longer resonate, relationships that drain rather than nourish, all become harder to ignore. This awareness can be uncomfortable, yet it is essential for realignment. Without silence, misalignment persists unnoticed. The sharpening effect of silence extends to decision-making. Choices made in a noisy mind are often rushed and reactive. Choices made in silence carry weight and clarity. The individual senses when something is right or wrong beyond rational explanation. This intuition is not mystical, it is the result of integrated perception. Over time, silence builds self-trust. The individual learns that guidance does not always come from outside. Answers arise when the mind is quiet enough to receive them. This reduces dependency on constant reassurance and validation. Confidence becomes internal rather than performative. In a world addicted to speed, the ability to slow down becomes a strategic advantage. While others chase immediacy, the silent observer sees consequences. While others react, the quiet mind anticipates. This foresight is not prediction, but sensitivity to patterns that only reveal themselves in stillness. Inner silence is not achieved once and kept forever. It is practiced repeatedly, reclaimed from distraction again and again. Each return strengthens the mind's capacity for focus. Over time, silence becomes familiar rather than intimidating. The individual no longer fears being alone with their thoughts because they have learned to listen without judgment. A mind sharpened by silence moves through the world with calm intensity. It speaks less but says more. It acts less impulsively but with greater impact. It does not need constant stimulation to feel alive because awareness itself becomes sufficient. In this state, distraction loses its grip, and clarity becomes the natural condition from which perception, decision, and action arise. The rejected parts of the self hold hidden power. From an early age, the individual learns that not every impulse, emotion, or trait is welcome. Some expressions bring approval, others bring correction, ridicule, or withdrawal of affection. Slowly, a silent sorting begins. Qualities that fit expectations are displayed, while those that threaten acceptance are pushed out of awareness. This process is not deliberate, it is instinctive. The mind chooses belonging over wholeness, safety over authenticity. What is rejected does not vanish. It moves into the background of the psyche, shaping behavior indirectly. Traits labeled as weakness, selfishness, anger, sensitivity, ambition, or desire remain alive beneath the surface. When denied expression, they seek alternative paths. They leak out through sarcasm, passive aggression, sudden rage, chronic guilt, or unexplained exhaustion. The individual believes these reactions are flaws, unaware that they are messages from parts of the self that were never allowed to speak. Society reinforces this division. Certain qualities are praised while others are condemned. Strength is admired, vulnerability mocked. Confidence is rewarded, doubt dismissed. Control is valued, emotion suppressed. Over time, people internalize these judgments and turn against themselves. They wage an inner war, attempting to eliminate traits that feel inconvenient or uncomfortable. Yet the psyche does not function through elimination, it seeks balance. The rejected parts often contain raw energy. Anger holds boundaries, sensitivity holds empathy, selfishness holds self-preservation. Fear holds instinct. When these are disowned, the individual becomes incomplete. They may appear composed, agreeable, and productive, but something essential is missing. This absence is often felt as emptiness or restlessness, a sense of living half a life while performing the other half. Power does not reside only in what is socially acceptable. It often hides in what was forbidden. The traits judged as negative frequently carry the exact qualities needed for growth. The person who denies their aggression may struggle to assert themselves. The person who denies vulnerability may struggle to form intimacy. The person who denies ambition may feel unfulfilled despite external success. The problem is not the trait itself, but the refusal to acknowledge it. Rejection of inner parts creates projection. What is denied internally is encountered externally. The individual criticizes, envies, fears, or idolizes others who express what they cannot. Strong emotional reactions toward others often point to something unresolved within. This mechanism keeps the rejected parts alive by relocating them into the world, where they appear threatening or fascinating rather than familiar. Integration begins with recognition. When a person notices recurring emotional patterns, they begin to trace them inward. Instead of asking why others behave a certain way, they ask what part of themselves is responding so intensely. This shift changes the direction of attention. Judgment softens into curiosity. Resistance becomes inquiry. Accepting rejected parts does not mean acting them out blindly. It means understanding their purpose. Every trait emerged for a reason. It served a need at some point, even if it later became inconvenient. When acknowledged consciously, these parts lose their destructive edge. They become available for intentional use rather than unconscious eruption. The fear of acknowledging rejected parts often comes from moral confusion. People assume that recognizing darker impulses means endorsing them. In reality, denial gives them more power. Conscious awareness introduces choice. When a person can feel anger without being consumed by it, desire without being enslaved by it, fear without being paralyzed by it, mastery develops. Many avoid this inner work because it threatens their self-image. They prefer to see themselves as purely kind, rational, or controlled. Yet this one-sided identity is fragile. It collapses under pressure. Wholeness is more resilient than purity. A person who knows their full range can adapt without losing themselves. The rejected parts also hold creativity. Original ideas often arise from unconventional thinking that was once discouraged. Emotional depth often comes from sensitivity that was once shamed. Leadership often requires assertiveness that was once labeled arrogant. When these qualities are reclaimed, expression becomes authentic rather than imitative. As integration progresses, inner conflict decreases. Energy previously spent on suppression becomes available for action. The individual feels more alive, not because they have added something new, but because they have stopped excluding parts of themselves. This inclusion brings a grounded confidence that does not depend on constant validation. Relationships change as well. When a person accepts their own complexity, they become more tolerant of others. They no longer demand perfection or consistency. They recognize contradictions as human rather than threatening. This reduces projection and conflict. Communication becomes clearer because it is no longer driven by unconscious defense. The process of reclaiming rejected parts is gradual. It unfolds through self-observation, emotional honesty, and patience. There is no final state of completion. New layers reveal themselves as life evolves. Each stage of growth brings new aspects into awareness. In times of stress, rejected parts often resurface more forcefully. This is not regression, it is invitation. The psyche uses pressure to demand integration. Ignoring these signals leads to repetition. Responding with awareness leads to expansion. The individual who embraces their rejected parts does not become chaotic or dangerous. They become grounded. They understand their own capacity for darkness and therefore are not shocked by it in the world. They develop humility without weakness and strength without cruelty. True power is not the absence of undesirable traits, but the ability to hold them consciously. When nothing within is disowned, nothing outside needs to be feared excessively. The person moves through life with depth, stability, and authenticity, drawing strength from the very aspects of themselves that were once hidden, silenced, or judged. Inner alignment creates effortless external advantage. When the inner world is fragmented, effort multiplies. Decisions feel heavy, motivation fluctuates, and progress comes in bursts followed by collapse. This is not due to a lack of discipline or intelligence, but due to inner contradiction. Different parts of the psyche pull in opposing directions, draining energy before action even begins. When alignment is absent, even simple tasks feel exhausting. Alignment begins with coherence between values, emotions, and actions. When what a person believes, feels, and does are in conflict, tension arises. This tension often manifests as procrastination, anxiety, or self-sabotage. The individual may push forward through force of will, but willpower alone cannot sustain long-term movement. Without alignment, effort becomes a constant struggle against oneself. Most people attempt to gain advantage by changing external conditions. They chase better systems, better strategies, better environment. While these matter, they are secondary. The same opportunity produces vastly different outcomes depending on the inner state of the person engaging with it. A mind filled with doubt interprets opportunity as risk. A mind grounded in clarity interprets challenge as direction. When inner alignment is present, action feels natural. There is no need for constant motivation because resistance decreases. The mind stops negotiating with itself. Decisions emerge from clarity rather than pressure. This creates the appearance of effortlessness to outsiders, who assume talent or luck, unaware of the inner integration that makes movement smooth. Alignment does not mean certainty or emotional comfort at all times. It means honesty. A person aligned with themselves acknowledges fear without letting it dictate direction. They recognize desire without becoming reckless. They act with awareness of consequence rather than denial of it. This grounded action builds trust in oneself, which compounds over time. External advantage often comes from consistency. Consistency arises not from rigid discipline, but from internal agreement. When the psyche agrees on direction, repetition becomes sustainable. Habits form naturally. Focus deepens. Progress accumulates quietly. Others notice results without seeing the inner simplicity that produced them. Misalignment often shows up as overcompensation. People who lack inner coherence may seek excessive control, validation, or recognition. They push harder, speak louder, and perform constantly to cover internal doubt. This creates friction with others and instability in outcomes. Alignment removes the need to prove. Action becomes sufficient without performance. The aligned individual responds to circumstances rather than reacting to them. Because internal noise is reduced, perception becomes sharper. Subtle shifts in environment are noticed earlier. Timing improves. Decisions feel intuitive yet grounded. This responsiveness creates advantage in complex situations where rigid plans fail. Inner alignment also affects how obstacles are experienced. Challenges no longer feel like personal attacks or signs of failure. They are seen as feedback. This perspective reduces emotional reactivity and preserves energy. Instead of spiraling into frustration, the aligned mind adjusts calmly. Adaptation becomes fluid rather than forced. When values are clear, choices simplify. Many people exhaust themselves weighing options that conflict with their deeper priorities. An aligned individual eliminates paths that do not resonate, not through avoidance, but through clarity. This reduces distraction and increases depth. Energy flows toward fewer goals with greater impact. Alignment strengthens boundaries. The individual becomes more selective with commitments, relationships, and attention. Saying no becomes easier because it is not based on fear or ego, but on self-respect. This selectivity protects focus and prevents burnout. External advantage emerges from conservation as much as from action. Over time, alignment creates trust from others. Consistent behavior, clear communication, and grounded presence signal reliability. People sense when someone is internally stable. Opportunities gravitate toward those who do not oscillate between extremes. Leadership emerges not through dominance, but through coherence. Inner alignment also reduces the need for external comparison. The individual measures progress against their own values rather than against others' outcomes. This frees mental space and emotional energy. Without constant comparison, growth becomes intrinsic. Satisfaction comes from movement rather than recognition. Effortless advantage does not imply ease in every moment. It implies efficiency of energy. Aligned individuals still work hard, but their effort is focused. They are not battling inner resistance while confronting external challenges. This concentration multiplies impact without multiplying exhaustion. As alignment deepens, identity stabilizes. The individual no longer shifts persona to fit circumstances. This authenticity reduces cognitive load. Decisions do not require constant self-monitoring. Expression becomes simple and direct. Others respond to this clarity with respect, even if they disagree. The world often misinterprets alignment as confidence or charisma. In truth, it is inner agreement made visible. When thought, emotion, and action move in the same direction, presence intensifies. This presence influences environments subtly but powerfully. External advantage is often temporary when built on force, manipulation, or performance. It fades when conditions change. Advantage built on alignment adapts. Because it originates internally, it is portable. The aligned individual carries their stability into new environments, new challenges, and new phases of life. When inner alignment is maintained, setbacks do not fracture identity, they inform it. Success does not inflate the ego, it reinforces direction. The individual remains centered regardless of outcome because their sense of self is not dependent on external validation. Effortlessness is not laziness, it is precision. It is the absence of wasted movement. When the inner world is organized, the outer world responds accordingly. The person appears ahead not because they rush, but because nothing within them pulls backward while they move forward.